Okay, welcome to the third and the last video in today's lecture on modality. Congratulations for getting through the first two videos and working on the study guide. I know it's a lot of material, hitting you with a lot at one time, but we need to get through it very, very quickly. This video, we're going to take a look at the second category in terms of meaning, and that is talking about getting things done or trying to control the course of events. Like the first category, there are multiple subcategories. The first and most important in this one is the concept of obligation and necessity. When something is obligated, you need to do it. If you're obliged to do something, it has to be done. If there is a lack of obligation, then it does not have to be done. Necessity, which refers to the fact that you need to do something, is closely tied to this concept. Desirability, how desirable is something you want to do. You try to control the events because you wish for something or desire for something. We often use lexical verbs like that, but sometimes we often use a modal verb as well. Permission and then forbidding permission. Can you do something? Meaning, I give you permission to do it, or I forbid you from doing something. Volition, we talked about this in the first video. This refers to an individual person's will to do or not to do something. You choose to do it. You choose to give thanks. That's an example of volition. And like I said earlier in the first video, we do not normally use this term with our students. We use other ways to express this, and you're going to see that in this video. And finally, your ability. You control a situation by having the ability to do something or no ability to do something. So these five categories are the categories associated with this grouping. So we're going to take a look at the modal verbs in exactly the same order. So we're going to start with can. Remember, can is the third most frequent modal verb in English. It's used to seek or to give permission in a very informal manner, actually. You can borrow the car, but be careful. It's very conversational. I'm giving you permission to borrow the car. Can I borrow the car? Is asking for permission or seeking permission. But again, it's very conversational and also very informal. In the negative form, we forbid something from happening. You can't have that. You might break it. So I forbid you from touching that. I forbid you from holding that because I'm afraid that it will break. Used to indicate ability. This is very, very frequent use. And it's often used with verbs of perception, like hear and see, and verbs of mental processes, like follow, guess, imagine, and understand. We often say things like, yeah, I can play the guitar, I can run 50 kilometers. I guess that's a lot. But it often is used too with verbs where we don't see the ability so clearly. You can hear the excitement. I have the ability to hear the crowd being so loud in the stadium. Could. Could, like can, is used to ask for permission. Okay, now notice the difference here. It's just used to ask for permission. Could I talk to you for a moment? Could I talk to you for a moment is preferable over something like can I talk to you for a moment. It does have a bit more formality to it and politeness to it. But when you're asking to talk to somebody or you're asking for permission, there should be a level of formality to it. It's used to express your disapproval or your criticism. And then when it's used in this form, it's used with the perfect infinitive. That is the concept of have plus the past participle. So for example, you could have told me. Why did you keep it to yourself? I'm disapproving of the decision you made to keep it to yourself. I'm criticizing you. Notice, could have told. It's used with the perfect infinitive. A very, very common phrase in English is how could you? Okay, which is a little bit different, but it also is used to show disapproval or criticism, especially when you're really, really reproaching someone. You're really, really on their case about something. How could you forget that we were going out to dinner? Okay, I mean, I just can't believe it. It's beyond my reasoning to understand how you could forget that. It's also used to indicate general statements of past ability. You know, when I was a kid, I couldn't swim. That's a general statement. You know, not talking any specific time in the past. It's specifically talking, you know, in the past, I couldn't swim. But today, you know, after I took lessons, I can swim. Okay. So past ability. And we're going to see that this gets tied into the concept of used to. We have to be careful with past ability because you use could, do you use could, or do you use was or were able to? Could, as we just said, is used for general statements, but use was or were able to when referred to actual achievements that are in the past. When I was a kid, I could run very fast. That's very general. But in 2002, which is past, I was able to run and finish a marathon. That's an achievement. Was able to is used in the second sentence. You cannot use could in the second sentence. But in the negative, both can refer to non-achievements. So you would use wasn't or weren't able to for an actual non-achievement. But when we refer to general, we can use both. So she couldn't move on her own. She wasn't able to move on her own. Because this is negative, it doesn't matter. We could use both here. Okay, may. Used to ask for, grant, or refuse permission. May I see that? Again, it has a level of formality to it. It's more used, I think, sometimes in American English than in British English. Surprisingly enough, this is one instance where Americans tend to be a little bit more formal. In classrooms, students have to say, may I go to the bathroom? So to have to ask for permission as opposed to, can I go to the bathroom? Because it's a bit more formal. Used to express wishes or curses. When you desire something or you curse something, that's a type of desire as well. May you both have a long and happy married life together. That's a wish. Okay. You will always use may in those cases. Might, on the other hand, again, remember it has a low frequency. It also is used to ask for, grant, or refuse permission. It's very, very formal, but also very, very infrequent. May I speak to Mr. Jones, please? You might get that on a conversation where somebody's calling a business where they don't know anybody. It's very, very polite. Now, we've seen that these four modal verbs can be used to seek permission. So what is the difference? Bring up our trusty Klein. And we have very formal versus very informal. And if we go through this, we see that might tends to be very, very formal, but can is very, very informal. Could and may fall around the middle. May is a bit more formal than could, but could is more formal than can. Okay, so can is the most informal, could is more formal than can, but less formal than may. May is more formal than could, but less formal than might, and might is the most formal, but also the most infrequently used. Then moving on, we can talk about formality when we talk about giving permission, and giving permission only concerns two. So if we look at our client again, we see that may has the higher formality level and can has the closer to the informal level. One more client here in terms of requests. We find that in terms of formal and informal, that could is a very formal request, can is a very informal request. Okay, so you can see how these clients can be very, very helpful in teaching your students. They can ask themselves, how formal is my request, how informal, and then that can help them to decide which of the modal verbs to use. Will. Remember, will is the most frequently used modal verb in English. One of the things it's used for is to make requests or to invite somebody to somebody. So you're giving them, making a request or invite. It's a form of permission giving. Will you join us for dinner after work? Okay, so like I'm sort of giving you permission to join us by requesting that you join us or inviting you to join us. Used to issue directives. So when you want to really tell somebody to do something, will you sit down and be quiet? Okay, you're issuing a directive there. That's what you want the people to do. So it has a volition meaning. Also, in terms of volition, to express disapproval. I will keep banging my elbow on that shelf, damn it, until I move it. Okay, so a level of disapproval. And this is an interesting use. It used to respond to an inanimate object. By that, you ever try to open a window and it just won't open? Oh, this window won't open. You're actually referring to the window, and so you're talking about the fact that it's stuck or something. That's responding to an inanimate object. Will this printer do double-sided copies? I'm referring to a printer. So I would never do it in any other way except to use will. Shall. Shall too is used to issue directives with I and will, and it's very, very formal. It's also used with the others. You shall be punished. When you're issuing a directive, you're not talking about I or will. You're actually talking about somebody else. And would. Used for volition in the past. Patsy was so kind, she would always help. So in the past, she was one of these people that always volunteered. That's what she does, or that's what she's willing to do. Used in the past to respond to an inanimate object, like would, like will. It was a freezing cold morning and the car would not start. So we're referring to the car here. The car was not starting because it was freezing cold. They probably live in Buffalo. To make very formal requests, would you give me a call this evening? Again, very, very formal request. Should. One of the most frequent uses for should is to express something that is desirable. She should be wearing glasses. It's desirable that she should be wearing glasses because she's having a hard time seeing. This is one of the most frequent uses. It's also used to indicate surprise. I'm sorry that he should be so upset by what I said. I'm surprised that he's upset by what I said. I use should in this indication. And to give thanks, gratitude specifically for gifts. What a surprise! You shouldn't have gotten me anything. You're expressing your gratitude in this case by saying, negating the fact that they got you a present. Must. Must has a lot of meanings here. This is where it mostly functions. A strong sense of personal obligation, meaning that it comes from inside the person and is applied to either themselves or somebody else. So for example, if your boss says to you, you must get those done by tomorrow, it's your boss that has that obligation that has to be done. It's a personal obligation, and he's putting that obligation on you. Okay? It's what we refer to as intrinsic obligation. The intrinsic comes from within somebody. Okay? Used in very, very polite invitations. Oh, you must come on this trip. It will be amazing. Okay? But again, it's very, 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 very polite in these indications. It's also used to indicate that something is a rule of law. Passengers must not cross the yellow line. Okay. Notice when you're on an airplane or something and they're speaking in English, they're always using must to give you the rules. You must stay in your seat. You must fasten your seatbelt. Used to reproach somebody. Must you play that music so loud? It's very strong, and that's one of the strongest uses for it. It's really a negative statement. Must you play that music so loud? It's hurting my ears, or something like that. To forbid something. You must not leave stuff under the sofa. Notice this is not the lack of obligation. This is actually forbidding something. I forbid you I forbid you from leaving stuff under the sofa. Okay, so remember, can't is used for the lack of obligation. Must not is used for forbidding. Keep that in mind. Ought to, we saw ought to in the first video. It's also in this one. Used to indicate a desire. It's very much synonymous with should, but it's less frequent than should. You ought to put money in your pension fund. It's desirable for you to do this. Dare. Dare is a strange one. Dare is also a lexical verb. But when we use dare without the to, it's a modal. When we use dare with the to, it's a lexical verb. Confusing. Dare indicates that you express courage to do something. It's most frequently used in negative and interrogative clauses. So you don't very commonly find it in positive statements. Dare we write him and complain? There's an example, but that's not very common. And that's an interrogative. I daren't ring Linda again. Okay. It's not something that's used an awful lot. It's used more in British English than it is in American English. But overall, it's not very frequent. Need. Used to indicate an absence of obligation when we use the need not form. Okay, so like can't, there's an absence of obligation. She needn't take the exam if she is not well. We could, if we're putting it in the past, we then have to use it in its lexical form. I didn't need to go back to the hospital. So there was an absence of obligation. This refers to something in the past. So I have to use the lexical form. So I have to add the auxiliary do and also the to. Used to indicate obligation in very formal situations. No one else need see what he was doing either. Yeah, it's a very much more formal situation, a business situation or something like that where we use it. And when we're talking about things that are unnecessary, then we also use it with the perfect infinitive. So the have plus the past participle. I needn't have bought so much food if no one is coming to Thanksgiving dinner. It's an unnecessary situation to buy all that food because nobody's coming. But notice it's definitely used in this case with the perfect infinitive. All right, some of the semi-modals in this category. B2 in this case gives directives and also desires. Had better with the no, and it's always had, never have. Had better or apostrophe D better is something, it's a desire. Okay, I had better eat bacon and eggs. Okay, it's the desire. Have to or have got to is very much extrinsic obligation, meaning that somebody else, not you, not a person, but something like a government or a society, is putting this obligation on top of you. You have to follow the law. You have to stop at a red light. You have to stop at a stop sign. You have to yield when it's yellow. Would rather, when you're giving a desire, and that's often two choices. Would you rather do A or do B? And it's often used to decline request. I would rather not go. And notice where the placement of the not is. I would rather not go. Be able to, we've seen, talks about ability. Be obliged to and be supposed to apply to obligation. He is obliged to start work at 9 o'clock. He is supposed to start work at 9 o'clock. Obliged to has a higher degree of obligation than supposed to. And then if we use it in the not form, being not supposed to, then you're forbidding something. He is not supposed to touch anything on that shelf. He's forbidden from touching anything on that shelf. Now, there are some lexical verbs that are used primarily for obligation. Things like allow, demand, entail, forbid, force, involve, let, make, mean, necessitate, permit, prohibit, require, and want. Notice that some of these imply negative. Prohibit, forbid. These imply a negative or a lack of obligation. The others imply a positive obligation. So, these are the two meanings. You have seen them now. You've gone through the study guide. You have a little bit more to do in the study guide in preparation for Friday's class. So make sure that you complete the activities in the study guide and that you bring it to class on Friday, because we are going to work on this topic on Friday. Okay, so thank you very much, and I will see you all on Friday.